Okay, welcome everyone. Today we are going to be doing a full speaking test, full TOEFL speaking test. So in the last few videos that we've done, we've looked at each of the 6 TOEFL speaking tasks, and we've gone through some sort of method and introduction and some practice for each of the individual tasks. But today we're going to put all of that together into a full and complete speaking test. And I'm also going to show you some samples as well, or let you listen to some speaking samples as well. All right, so let me just fix up my slides because that was a bit weird. All right, here we go. So the 6 speaking tasks are a description task and an opinion task. So these 2 are independent because you're not actually having to read anything or listen to anything. You're just given a prompt and you need to speak. Task 3, summarize opinion. 4, summarize reading and lecture. Summarize problem and summarize lecture. So these last 4 tasks are integrated. That means you're either going to have to listen to something, a conversation or a lecture, or read a short passage and listen to something and then speak. All right, so you need to get ready. You're going to need a pen and paper to take notes as you listen. And you're also going to need your phone for voice recording. So you want to actually record your responses so that you can listen back to them later. Is everybody ready? Because we're going to go straight into it, all right? So I'm going to display the prompt on the screen and read it out loud to you. And then I'm going to set the timer, and then you're going to have to speak your response into your phone, into your voice recorder. And when the timing is up, you should stop the recording because that's what's going to happen in the real test. And then at the end, you can actually go back and listen to your recordings. Okay, so here goes. Independent speaking, task 1, description. What personality quality do you think is most important in a good friend? Explain why. You now have 15 seconds to prepare your response. Your time starts now. You now have 45 seconds to speak your response. That's the end of the first speaking task. Task 2, opinion. Some people think that tourism is good for small towns. Others think that it is harmful. What do you think and why? Give examples and details in your response. You have 15 seconds to prepare your response. You have 45 seconds to record your response. Okay, we're moving on now to the integrated speaking section. So here's where it's important to have your pen and paper to take notes. For task 3, summarize opinion. Firstly, read the passage. You have 45 seconds to do so. Now listen and take notes.
I totally disagree with shortening the seminar classes.
Why?
Well, look, the students who complained about the classes being too long are the ones who stay up late, partying every night.
If that's the case.
I totally disagree with shortening the seminar classes.
Why?
Well, look, the students who complained about the I totally disagree with shortening the seminar classes.
Why?
Well, look, the students who complained about the classes being too long are the ones who stay up late, partying every night.
Concentration and can't pay attention. But how do you know they're the ones who complained?
I heard a group of students talking outside the dean's office about it. They're the ones who made the proposal. I know the students. They're always in the college bar till after midnight.
Right, so you're saying the problem is really the students and not the long classes?
Yeah, those same students were in one of my classes last year, and whenever I looked over at them, they were actually sleeping.
Oof, that's not good. What about the professors complaining about attendance?
Well, that's because those students leave class early to go home and sleep. Now the department is taking away an hour of the class, and that's the best part.
Really?
Yeah, that's actually when the students get really involved in a discussion and start exchanging important ideas. That's what makes a seminar different to a regular class. If they're going to cut that part out, then we're going to lose the most worthwhile part of the seminar.
The woman expresses her opinion about the change made by the geology department. State her opinion about this change and explain the reasons she gives for her opinion. You'll have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You have 60 seconds to speak your response. Task 4, Summarize reading and lecture. You'll have 45 seconds to read the passage before hearing the lecture. Now listen and take notes.
Let's talk firstly about short-term memory. It's the very short time that you keep something in mind before either dismissing it or transferring it to long-term memory. Remembering what you ate for breakfast this morning or the TV show you watched last night are what constitutes short-term memory. In most cases, these short-term memories will remain there for anywhere between 30 seconds and several days. Many will be forgotten. Nobody can remember what they ate for breakfast for the last 10 years, effectively pushed out of the brain to make way for new facts and memories. However, some things will remain, especially if we make a conscious effort to remember them. They are transferred to an area of the brain that stores long-term memories. Long-term memory refers to events, facts, or experiences that were laid down weeks, months, or even years ago. If you decide that you have to remember something, for example, when studying for a test, the brain makes connections between the cells, which alters their structure, and this is what allows us to retain memories. Sometimes things that you may not have intended to remember are stored in your long-term memory. For example, a fun day out at the fair when you were a child, or the death of a much-loved pet. The reason you remember these is because they are often very strongly linked to a particular emotion or sensory experience. You remember the day at the fair because you had fun, laughed, or were even scared of the rides. You remember the death of your dog because it was a particularly sad experience.
Explain long-term and short-term memory and how the examples used by the professor illustrate the concepts. You'll have 60 seconds to speak your response. But before that, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, you may speak now for 60 seconds. Task 5. Summarize problem. Listen and take notes.
Did you hear about the internship program scheme that the college is offering for the vacation?
Yeah, I saw something about it in the campus newspaper, but didn't really read all the details.
Well, you get to work in an accounting firm and see how all the things we've been learning in our classes are relevant and can be put in a real-life industry setting.
Yeah, right. Sounds useful.
I think it is. We need practical skills to really understand how to do this job. We'll be able to use what we've learned in our assignments next term, and it'll make us more employable in the long term too. Plus, unlike regular internships, we actually get paid, which is a real bonus.
Yeah. It's a shame I won't be able to do it.
Oh no, why not?
I want to retake one of my exams again, the exam on corporate reporting.
Oh, did you fail it? I thought you passed that exam.
No, I didn't fail it, but I barely passed it. Remember, I was away a lot of last term for therapy after my accident. I missed a lot of lectures. I know I can do better, and my tutor says I can retake it and increase my grade, but I'll have to attend a 2-week revision course during the semester break.
Oh, so you don't have to do it.
Well, no, I don't have to, but the exam counts for 60% of our final grade for that class, so obviously I want to do as well as I can. Otherwise, it's going to mess up my whole GPA.
But you're going to have to pay for that. Sounds expensive.
Actually, the revision course doesn't cost anything. It's free, and since there won't be many students there, I'll be able to talk in depth to the tutors about any aspects of corporate reporting that I find confusing.
Well, I get why you want to do it, but in my opinion, getting some work experience at a real accounting firm is far more useful, especially since you don't need to take the exam again.
I suppose you could be right. Well, I'll think about it.
Summarize the problems the speakers are discussing, then state which solution you would recommend. Explain the reasons for your recommendation. Prepare your response. You have 30 seconds. You now have 60 seconds to speak your response. Okay, to the sixth and final speaking task, summarize lecture. Listen and take notes.
50 years ago, the historic launch of the Apollo 11 mission carried 3 astronauts towards the moon. 2 of them would set foot on the lunar surface for the first time in human history, as millions of people around the world followed their steps on television. While on the surface, the astronauts set up several experiments, collected samples of lunar soil and rock to bring home, erected a US flag, and took core samples from the crust. However, there are theories that the moon landing never happened, that it was all one big hoax or conspiracy. The first of these theories that I'll debunk is that the American flag was fluttering in the wind, and we all know there's no wind on the moon. So, conspiracy theorists say that the moon landing must have been filmed on Earth. However, in reality, the flag was actually rippled because it had been folded during storage. These ripples could be mistaken for movement in a still photograph. Videos show that when the astronauts let go of the flagpole, it vibrated briefly, but then remained still with the ripples intact. Another theory is that the mysterious reflections in some of the photographs suggest that artificial lights were used, and these come from studio lights on a production set. The fact of the matter is, it's highly unlikely NASA would make such an obvious blunder if they'd spent millions of dollars to make a fake moon landing. Hello, NASA's going to release a picture showing studio lights? A third conspiracy theory cites the strange and inconsistent shadows seen on the moon's surface. The fact is that the shadows on the moon were complicated by reflected light, uneven ground, and lunar dust. There are several light sources: the sun, sunlight reflected from the Earth, sunlight reflected from the moon's surface, and sunlight reflected from the astronauts and the lunar module. Light from these sources is scattered by lunar dust in many directions, including into shadows. Shadows falling into craters and hills may appear longer and shorter and distorted.
Using points and examples from the lecture, describe the theories discussed by the professor. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You now have 60 seconds to speak. Okay, that's the end of the sample speaking test. So I'm just going to take a look at some of your questions or comments if you have any. So any questions about the test before I let you listen to some sample responses? Because we actually have some students who recorded some responses for us to the questions that you just answered. But before that, any questions? Yeah, so that's a very good point from Matteo. It's hard to take notes and prioritize information. So there's a couple of things you can do with that, is really listen out for sort of words like firstly or secondly, or sort of transition words that show that the speaker is moving on to a new idea. Also, listen out for stress or emphasis in the speaker's voice. Usually, if they really sort of stress on a word or emphasize a word, it means that that point is important and you should take note of it. The main thing is really just practice, because it's not a skill that we use every day. We don't, sit around all day with a pen in our hand taking notes as we listen to people talk. So it's a skill that you really do need to practice. And also thinking about what's a main idea and what's a detail. So what are the, trying to identify the main point and then the supporting information that the speaker gives to support that point or strengthen that point. And again, that's something that comes with practice. You can use things like TED, TED.com, to listen to short lectures. You can choose, say, 3-minute lectures or 6-minute lectures to listen to and practice note taking. And if you're not sure if you've gotten the main points or the details, you can actually read the transcripts that are included in that website. So then you can actually have a look at the transcripts and compare the transcripts to your notes to see how many of the main points did you actually pick up. Another thing with note taking is not writing full sentences or full words, shortening words, using digits instead of numbers, symbols like arrows, meaning something like means. So everyone has their own way of, or their own set of symbols that they use for note taking. I've got mine, and maybe only I can understand them. So as long as you can understand them, that's fine. But yeah, try and find a way that kind of makes it easier and quicker for you, because it's very hard for you to write full sentences and still keep up with what the speaker is saying. So you're just looking at sort of dot points and trying to isolate ideas. The next thing, do we need perfect definition of the term, for example, short-term memory? So one of the audios that you heard was about long-term and short-term memory. So Asmita, can you just rephrase your question a little bit, just so I can answer it properly? You basically need to define it the way that the lecturer defines it. So you're not expected to have any specialist knowledge on the topic external to what you've actually heard in the audio. So the only information you need to give is the information that you've given in the audio, that you've heard in the audio. Okay, so a few others. If I can't listen to the speaker clearly, is my speaker bad or my hearing ability is bad? In the audio recording in the test, it will all be sort of very audible. They'll have gone through tests to make sure that you can hear their audio recording. Without audio recording, hoping that you were able to hear them all. If not, you can go back and rewatch it again. Another question, if I miss some information, should I still try to speak for the maximum time? Yes, you should try to speak for the maximum time. You won't lose marks for speaking for less than the maximum time though, as long as you give as much detail as you can in your response and capture the main ideas. Okay, I'm going to let you listen to some responses now, some sample responses by some of our students. So let me just get myself back in the right place. Okay. So do you remember the first task, the description? What personality quality do you think is most important to a good friend and why? All right, so here's a sample response to that one.
Personally, I think the quality that is most important in a good friend is loyalty. The difference between an average and a loyal friend is the support and care they provide. True and loyal friends unconditionally will want the best for you and will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. In other words, he or she should be honest with you all the time. He or she will encourage you to see things in the right way. Loyalty means that you can trust your friend to protect you and always have your back and be there when you need them.
Task 2, the opinion. Some people think that tourism is good for small towns. Others think that it is harmful. What do you think and why? And give examples in your response.
Tourism can have both positive and negative effects on small towns. Although on one hand, tourism can bring prosperity to small towns by generating the economy, I think it does more harm than good. The traditional way of life will eventually be disrupted, and the local people will end up putting themselves and their traditions on show to please tourists and end up losing the authenticity and true value of their culture. It may even lead to the erosion of the environment and sacred sites as more and more people visit. This can be seen in the case of Bali, where tourism is branching out into more remote locations and forests are being destroyed to build hotels.
Task 3, summarize opinion. The woman expresses her opinion about the change made by the geology department. State her opinion about this change and explain the reasons she gives for her opinion. So here is a sample response.
Okay. The woman is not happy about the geology seminars being shortened. The department has shortened them from 3 hours to 2 hours because students have complained that they are too long. However, the student disagrees. She says that the students who complained stayed up late and party every night. And that is why they can't concentrate in the class and leave early. She doesn't think the class should be changed for them. She says that the last hour of the class is the best part because that's when students participate in discussion and exchange ideas. She doesn't think it's fair that all the students should miss out on that because that's what makes the seminar class so special.
Task 4, summarize reading and lecture. Explain long-term and short-term memory and how the examples used by the professor illustrate the concepts.
According to the passage, our brain filters out information received during the day and stores it in either short or long-term memory. It tells us that the short-term memory is the storage of information for a limited amount of time, whereas long-term memory is infinite. The professor illustrates short-term memory by giving the example of a TV show or a meal that someone ate. These memories are pushed out of the brain to make room for new ones. However, information stays in long-term memory that is attached to an emotional or sensory experience, like the death of a pet or a fun ride you went on as a child. We also remember things we make a conscious effort to. So, when studying for an exam, that information is transferred into long-term memory.
Task 5, summarize problem. Summarize the problem the speakers are discussing, then state which solution you would recommend and explain the reasons for your recommendation. Okay, here is a sample response.
The man has two options for the vacation. He can either take an accounting internship or an intensive exam revision course. The woman suggests that the internship will be more beneficial as they will be able to learn real-life accounting skills in an industry environment. However, the man failed an important exam which will account for the majority of his final grade and wants to take it again. Therefore, he thinks it will be better for him to take the 2-week intensive course to help him prepare for the exam. Personally, I would recommend that he take the internship. It will give on-the-job experience which will help him after he graduates, and it is also paid. So this could not only be a good professional opportunity, but a financial one as well. He can always work on increasing his GPA in other classes.
And finally, summarize lecture. Using points and examples from the lecture, describe the theories discussed by the professor.
The lecturer talks about conspiracy theories related to the moon landing. They use evidence from the pictures and videos of the event to support their theories. First, the images of the American flag look like it was waving in the wind, and there is no wind on the moon. However, the lecturer says that the flag was not waving, but had ripples in it from being folded up in storage. Second, they say that the whole thing was filmed in a studio because there are reflections that look like studio lights. The lecturer discredits this theory by saying that NASA would not make such an obvious mistake. Third is the theory that there are distorted shadows on the moon's surface. But the lecturer says that the shadows are inconsistent because the moon has many light sources, including the sun, light reflected from the earth and light reflected from the moon.
Okay, questions and answers. So any feedback, questions, comments about the sample responses that you just heard? So they were quite high level responses. They would be between 3 and a 4. So the in TOEFL speaking, the highest score you can get is or you're scored out of 4. So they were quite high level responses. They gave quite detailed, full and complete answers. They were spoken at a good pace. Their fluency was fine. Mostly the pronunciation was easy to understand. So what did you think of those?